In this video of theories, I'll introduce charismatic leadership. Throughout history, some individuals have been described by many as charismatic leaders. Although not much research on charismatic leadership has been conducted in the field of educational leadership, it's actually one of the most often researched leadership theories in the field of leadership. In our daily conversations, we often ascribe a mystical quality to charisma. What is charisma exactly? How does an individual emerge as a charismatic leader? How to tell if an individual is more charismatic than others? Is charisma a trait that is teachable? I'll try to answer those questions in this video. How to define charisma? As I wrote in my book on how to develop theoretical frameworks, it is the norm, not the exception, that a construct has many definitions. The Greek word charisma means divine gift. A widely used definition of charisma is the one proposed by sociologist Max Weber. Weber defined charisma as a certain quality of an individual personality by virtue of which he is set apart from ordinary men and treated as endowed with supernatural, superhuman, or at least specifically exceptional powers or qualities. These are not accessible to the ordinary person, but are regarded as exemplary, and on the basis of them, the individual concerned is treated as a leader. According to Weber's definition, charisma sets a charismatic leader apart from others, and charisma is treated as endowed with supernatural, superhuman, or at least specifically exceptional powers or qualities. Charisma is a perceived capacity to inspire devotion and enthusiasm. It is an attribution based on followers' perceptions and interpretations of their leader's behavior. It is an exceptional power or quality that comes from how much followers appreciate their leader's behavior. Because charisma is highly dependent on followers' perception, one follower's charismatic leader may be despised by others. A charismatic leader can be considered ambitious by some people, but reckless by others. In the book Hawking, The Selling of a Scientific Celebrity, the author Charles Seif wrote about charisma of Stephen Hawking. To the public, everything Hawking did was extraordinary and different and courageous. It was a spectacle when he spoke, when he ate, when he danced, when he worked, when he loved. To Hawking, there was no courage, merely being himself. The public treasured every encounter with Hawking that seemed to express his real, unfiltered personality. For example, he was notorious for his bullheaded indifference to other vehicles when driving his wheelchair on the streets around Cambridge University. And people find this utterly charming. Hawking appeared to the world to be something more than human. His mind is so transcendent that he was in a class by himself. He inhabited an intellectual plane above the realm of normal humanity. During the last third of his life, Hawking was firmly entrenched as the world's most celebrated living scientist, yet his actual scientific contributions were more or less irrelevant to his fame. Though he was a regular fixture in the media, the press attention was not usually related to his science. Hawking's research during the years of his greatest popularity would be largely discounted and have little lasting impact on the world of physics. He was like a collapsed star. Space around him glowed brightly with his energy, but at core, he was but a faint reflection of what he once had been. People tend to hope for a charismatic savior who can take them from economic gloom and social breakdowns into sunnier terrain, take them out of icy darkness into sunnier bloom. This hope was illustrated by the following comments of a Nazi high school teacher as he reflected on the failure of the Weimar Republic. I reached the conclusion that no party but a single man could save Germany. This opinion was shared by others, for the cornerstone of monuments was laid in my hometown. The following line was inscribed on it: "Descendants who read these words, know ye that we eagerly await the coming of the man whose strong hand may restore the order." As historian Andrew Roberts observed, Hitler acquired charisma through his own unceasing efforts to create a cult of his own personality. He deliberately nurtured this status as infallible Superman until millions proved willing to accept him at his own outrageously inflated estimation. Leaders are expected to be a savior, a Superman, and a hero. Many leaders appear to have a savior mentality. Using a rhetoric of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, some leaders or leadership job candidates present themselves as a savior who can save Black and Hispanic children. The candidate's competence, qualifications, and prior experience take a second place. Charisma is a curse, not a cure for social problems. Many studies diagnose leaders who have cultivated mass followings as suffering from a wide variety of mental disorders, including paranoid delusion, narcissistic personality, and borderline personality disorder. Our preoccupation with charisma can be dangerous. How does an individual emerge as a charismatic leader? The first step is to win your attention. How to win your attention? A powerful tool charismatic leaders use is to develop a well-crafted, galvanizing vision. It's not just any vision statement that has to include the word all, like the statement of all students succeed. Charismatic leaders' vision is so bold that it grabs your attention. In an article titled "Visionary Communication Qualities as Mediators of the Relationship Between Narcissism and Attributions of Leader Charisma," researchers reported a positive correlation between visionary boldness and followers' perception of charismatic leadership, with a correlation coefficient of 0.32. Here are some examples of bold visions. In 1962, to rally national support for a very expensive program of human exploration to the moon, John F. Kennedy delivered the speech, "We choose to go to the moon."
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too. It is for these reasons that I regard the decision last year to shift our efforts in space from low to high gear as among the most important decisions that will be made during my incumbency in the office of the presidency.
In the 1960s, this vision was bold. Many people were excited. They didn't know how to go to the moon exactly, but they wanted to be part of the group to figure it out. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, charisma is a perceived capacity to inspire devotion and enthusiasm. JFK's go-to-the-moon vision did not galvanize everyone. On July 17, 1987, as more than 1 million people gathered along Florida's Space Coast to watch the launch Apollo 11, about 500 protesters led by civil rights leader Ralph Abernathy arrived outside the gates of Kennedy Space Center a few days before the launch. They brought with them 2 mules and a wooden wagon to illustrate the contrast between the exorbitantly expensive space program and families who could not afford food or a decent place to live. Another example of bold vision is one of the now defunct Theranos. How do you feel when you have a blood test? What if, with a finger prick, I can tell you how healthy you are and whether you have cancer? That's the vision of the now defunct Theranos, a technology company that later got into a lot of trouble. Elizabeth Holmes envisioned to develop technology that could perform hundreds of tests on drops of blood taken from a finger prick. Holmes pledged that the method would liberate people from the tyranny of venous blood draws, which she likened to medieval torture. If you are interested in how Theranos fell and ceased operations, you can find many books and investigative reports out there. The company's trouble didn't come from the vision, but from what the leaders did to realize that vision. In fact, a bold vision is helpful for you to shape an image of a charismatic leader. As we all know that not every leader can craft a bold vision that grabs people's attention. What personality propels people to develop a bold vision? Narcissists. In the same article I just mentioned, the researchers reported that vision boldness mediated the relationship between narcissism and charismatic leadership. Narcissists are those who have a self-centered perspective, feelings of superiority, and a drive for personal power and glory. Narcissists' strong desire for promoting grandiose goals enable them to craft a bold vision to attract people's attention, which in turn contribute to followers' perception of charisma. It can be frightening to be led by narcissistic, charismatic leaders who can be simultaneously charming, manipulative, and cruel. This is probably why the book of Proverbs in the Bible has a verse, "Charm is deceptive." I'm not saying that all charismatic leaders are narcissists. In the article titled "Personality and Charismatic Leadership," published in the Leadership Quarterly in 1992, researchers characterized charismatic leaders into 2 groups: personalized charismatic leaders and socialized charismatic leaders. How to differentiate them? According to Robert House and Jane Howell, personalized charismatic leaders are self-aggrandizing, non-egalitarian, and exploitative. They tend to have the personality traits of the need for power, Machiavellianism, authoritarianism, and locus of control. They are aggressive, demanding, dominant leaders such as Jim Jones, who led a cult called People's Temple and ordered mass murder-suicide that killed 909 followers. Socialized charismatic leaders, on the other hand, are collectively oriented and non-authoritarian. They exercise power in a non-exploitative manner for collective interests. Instead of manipulating others, socialized charismatic leaders influence and motivate others by being supportive, sensitive, nurturing, and considerate. Their vision is more socialized, which focuses on we and includes outcomes and processes that benefit organizational members and communities. An example of a socialized charismatic leader is Jon Snow in the Game of Thrones. Another way to explain the relationship between narcissism and charismatic leadership is to focus on how the two constructs were theorized and operationalized. In a recent article titled Decoding the Narcissism Charisma Link, a facet approach published in Personality and Individual Differences in 2020, researchers investigated how different dimensions of the construct of narcissism were related to different dimensions of the construct of charisma. They differentiated three dimensions of narcissism: agentic, antagonistic, and communal narcissism. Agentic narcissism is associated with adaptive qualities, such as expressive and self-assured behavior, assertive self-enhancement through self-promotion, peer popularity, and a benevolent approach to conflict. Antagonistic narcissism is associated with maladaptive qualities such as aggressive and combative behavior, peer unpopularity, and a malevolent approach to conflict. Communal narcissism is associated with an emphasis on interpersonal relationships and concern for other people's well-being. The researchers collected the data from 727 participants and ran a structural equation model. The results suggested that two types of narcissism, that is, agentic and communal narcissism, were positively related to charisma, and antagonistic type of narcissism is negatively related to it. Agentic and communal narcissists strive to self-enhance, present themselves as charmers who can convert the masses with their rhetoric and gain social appeal. The difference between agentic and communal narcissists is that agentic narcissists proclaim and behave in a self-focused manner, but the communal narcissists proclaim to be other-focused but behave in a self-focused manner. This is why communal narcissists are sometimes called wolf in sheep's clothing. Another finding was that communal narcissism was more strongly related to affability than to influence. Affability signals trustworthiness and warmth, whereas influence signals dominance. All of those findings are helpful to explain why some studies find a relationship between narcissism and charisma, while other studies did not. So, if you want your vision to grab people's attention, your vision needs to be bold enough to stand out. If your vision is similar to many other vision statements out there, your vision does not grab people's attention. If people don't pay attention to your vision, how can they be inspired and energized by your vision? What's your organization's vision? Is it similar to other organizations' vision? If your vision sounds like the one that people have heard somewhere else, why do you think your vision can grab people's attention and energize them? In addition to win people's attention, charismatic leaders win people's heart. Abraham Lincoln once said, "To win a man to your cause, you must first reach his heart, the great high road to his reason." How do charismatic leaders win people's heart? They arouse people's emotions. Emotions have a motivational function. The root of the word emotion suggests that emotions compel us to act. When we are motivated, we are driven and want to roll up our sleeves to get things done. One way to arouse people's emotions is to remember the past and envision the future. Here we go back to the importance of vision in leadership. When people envision the future, the brain's default mode network is activated, including the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, which is part of the brain regions that process emotions. Moreover, the brain regions activated while envisioning the future are the same regions activated while remembering the past. The memories of past can be a source of pain and anger. But if these emotions are followed by envisioning a future that is comforting and hopeful, who want to sit idle? In addition to the emotions evoked by envisioning the future and remembering the past, another emotional side of charismatic leadership is supported by the correlation between charismatic leadership and a leader's positive emotional expression, which is contagious and influences the followers' emotions. To craft a vision that rallies people around a common goal, it is not enough to use abstract words such as equity, community, learning, and excellence. People's tendency to favor abstract language that cannot easily be visualized is called blurry vision bias. To overcome the blurry vision bias and to make your vision inspiring, you arouse people's emotions by remembering the past and envisioning the future with specific, vivid image-based rhetoric that takes people to mental time travel using their 5 senses: what they see in the future, what they hear in the future, what they smell in the future, what they taste in the future, and what they touch in the future. It is that vicarious mental experience that gives people hope and generates excitement. And these emotions are motivating and contagious. An example of using specific, vivid image-based rhetoric to envision the future is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. It was a vision that has rallied many people, and the people were excited to see what their future could hold for them. The speech not only has soaring rhetoric, but also takes audiences to mental time travel. It helped people to envision the future with the specific images.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up equal. Dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Those words and phrases generated vivid mental images of what the future could look like. One day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. One day, right down in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with the little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. This image-based rhetoric technique of envisioning the future is more effective than using abstract words such as justice. In the field of leadership, most of the literature talks about leaders need to articulate their vision, but that's only one side of the story. If vision communication takes both sender and recipient, then how is a vision received by the followers? Do different followers process the same leader's vision in the same way or differently? In fact, the followers' brains process the leader's vision differently, depending on whether the followers see their leaders represent them, fighting for their interest, and create a world in which they feel they matter. This shared group membership between leaders and followers is called social identity. It's the sense of us. It's the glue that binds people together. When the leader shares the followers' social identity, the followers process leaders' inspirational vision by recruiting the brain regions processing somatic information. However, when the leader does not share the followers' social identity, the followers' brain dismiss the leader's inspirational vision as the non-inspirational one. So it is not enough for a leader to articulate a bold vision. It is possible that your vision can be poorly received and even dismissed if the followers don't see you are one of them. A leader needs to be considered by their followers as representing them, fighting for their interest, and creating a world in which they feel they matter. In fact, that sense of connection people feel comes from similarities in brain activity in the same brain region between followers and their leaders. If a leader's vision resonates with the followers, their brain activities are synchronized. In neuroscience, it's called neurosynchrony or neurocoupling. You and your followers are not only on the same page, but also on the same wavelength. Followers can only be inspired and motivated to respond enthusiastically to a leader's vision when they see their leaders as one of us, rather than someone who is out for themselves or one of them. A leader's charisma can dramatically increase or decrease after his or her death. In an article titled "Dying for Charisma, Leaders' Inspirational Appeal Increases Postmortem," published in the Leadership Quarterly in 2017. Researchers argue that death was an event that could strengthen the connection between the leader and the group they belong to, which in turn would increase perceptions of leaders' charisma. One of the studies they carried out was to conduct a large-scale archival analysis of heads of states who died in office in the 21st century. The results suggest that the proportion of published news items about heads of state that included references to charisma increased significantly after their death. Did Abraham Lincoln's tragic death increase his charisma? What about JFK? What about Martin Luther King? Charisma is not something that people are born with. Otherwise, it would be difficult to explain why a person's charisma can dramatically increase or decrease after his or her death. Charisma is, at least in part, a social influence that increases after death. Moreover, researchers suggest that social influence and inspiration can be understood as products of people's capacity to embody valued social groups. In this video, I introduce the construct of charismatic leadership. I discuss the definitions of charisma, how an individual emerges as a charismatic leader, and whether charisma is a teachable trait. Charisma is a curse, not a cure for social problems. Our preoccupation with charisma can be dangerous. Have you encountered a charismatic leader? After learning that one type of charismatic leaders are narcissists, how to protect your organization from being taken over by narcissistic, charismatic leaders. If you want to know more about how to build a theoretical framework for your research, I have published a book titled Demystify Theories, a workbook for developing theoretical frameworks of educational leadership research. The link of the book is in the description below.